Hello and welcome to That Bible Guy and to the continuation of our series, a series for seekers. I hope you're all doing well. I'm in a bit of a need of a shave. But the question today is, what is God looking for? How can I be successful? So there's sort of two questions. What is God looking for? How can I be successful? What does God want from us? Those of us who are seeking God, and even those of us who are Christians, what does He want from us? What does He look for in us? And this is inspired by what I'm reading recently, 1 Samuel. So the book of the Old Testament, a story will almost definitely be familiar with, the story of David. David the king. And he's described as a king after God's own heart. So Israel asked for a king. They had Saul. He was not successful, did not follow God's ways. So it tells us in 1 Samuel 13 that God was seeking a new king. And he said, the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people. So God wanted a new king for the people, but it had to be a king after God's own heart. God chose David. David was the youngest of all his brothers. All his other brothers came before Samuel, who was choosing the king for God, and they were tall, they were powerful, they were strong, they were handsome, and they were considered to be the oldest, the greatest in that family line. Surely these are the men that God would choose, because it's don't look at the outward appearance. I've chose someone else, and he chose David, who wasn't even in the lineup to be chosen. He was off tending the sheep. He was the youngest. He was the most insignificant. He was off farming, looking after sheep. He was doing the menial tasks that normally a servant would be doing. Everyone had forgotten about him. And Samuel had to even ask his dad, Jesse, is there anyone else? So what does this show us? God said, this is a man who has got my heart. But what does that tell us then for what God's looking for in us? Because surely being a person after God's own heart is what we would all strive for. Well, it tells us in who God chose, that he chose David. It tells us that we don't have to be in the full-time ministry to be a man after God's own heart, to be pleasing to God. We don't have to be famous or prominent. We don't need to be well known or to be popular. We don't need to be respected by other people. David's brothers and his family clearly did not respect him. They gave him the job of the servant, and he had been forgotten about. We don't have to be respected to be a man after God's own heart, or man or woman after God's own heart. We don't need to have status for everyone to know who we are, to have influence, to have power over other people. We don't need to have respect necessarily, because David did not have respect amongst his brothers and his family at that time. We don't need to have the approval of other people. Again, David did not have the approval of other people, but in God's sight, he did not look at the things man looked at. He looked at the heart of David. We don't need to be popular with people. We don't need to have great responsibilities, to be someone of great responsibility or great standing. We don't need to have them things. David did not have them things. He was off tending the sheep, doing the most menial task, but God said, this man is a man after my own heart. He's the one that pleases me. He's the one I want you to be like. He's the one I favor. He's the one I've chosen. And you think, well, what was in David's heart that God would choose him to be the king over Israel, to take him from tending sheep to be the king of all his people? And there's several things you think come to mind when you look at David. Look at what he's doing. Look at his task. Look at his job. And you think, what is it that he's doing? What does that reveal about his characteristics that make him a man after God's own heart? Well, integrity. He's very integrous. He's very honest. He's obviously passionate. He's looking after these sheep. As we'll see in a moment, he went after lions and bears and anything that attacked the sheep in order to save the sheep. He was passionate. He was a hard worker. He was off grafting on many occasions throughout the scriptures while other people were not. He was willing to step up, as we know later on, to fight Goliath. And he was off, again, the only one that put himself forward. He was also faithful to God. He was faithful that God would work things out. He believed there was a higher power. There was a God in the universe who would sort these things out. He had faith. He was devoted. He gave everything to his task. And he was also, just to finish, very caring. He cared for his animals. He cared for what he was looking after, what was in his flock. If one got attacked or brought off, he would go after and sort it out. It makes me think of a scripture. Luke 16 verse 10 says, those who are faithful in small matters will be faithful in large matters. God, for me, used this principle in choosing David. This man is faithful at looking after sheep. When they're attacked, no matter how many of them there are, he's hardworking, he's honest, he's integrous, he's got passion, and he's devoted, and he's caring. He's a man after my own heart. Now, I have a bit of advice for us to follow here. For Christians, a few days, few weeks, few months, or for Christians like me, decades or even longer. There's something we need to do in order to, I think, to really be a man after God, a woman after God's own heart, but also to be successful. There's something that we can do today. There's two things that we can do today in order to be successful and to be pleasing to God. And the first one was what we just looked at there, which is be faithful in small matters. So decide whatever I'm given, I'm going to do it so well that God would choose me for something more. And the last bit of advice, just because we've all been thrust and put into some situation in life, Colossians 3:23 tells us, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Where are we at today? What job have you got? What responsibility have you got? Have you got no job? Who are you looking after? What have you been given? No matter how small it is, just like David, God's saying, work at it with all your heart. Honestly, integrity, passion, devotion, with a caring nature. If you give your all to whatever you've been given, I'll give you more. If you use this talent well, I'll give you another one. This is a promise from God. Work at it with all your heart as if serving the Lord. If you're faithful in small matters, I'll give you be faithful in larger matters. Take that away today. I'm going to work with all my heart at whatever God's given me. I'm going to do my absolute best, and I honestly believe God will be pleased. We can be men and women after God's own heart, and He will, as a result of that, I believe, give us more. If we're faithful with small things, He'll give us more. So that's just to help us today. I'm always inspired by these particular scriptures. Hopefully that's helped us today. If He has helped you in any way, just thinking about how we can be faithful to whatever God has given us in the hope that He may give us more, then please hit the like button. Please share it on to help other people if you think it would help others. Please subscribe to That Bible Guy if you haven't already. And if you're interested in supporting this ministry for extra lessons on a book I'm going to be doing soon on the book of Judges for Patreons, you can sign up there. You see the link below. Thanks for listening today, and let's get His word out there.